Hello everyone, I am Yasraj Soda and on the contemporary literature in English, I am presenting my topic, The Past We Choose, Memory Manipulation in the Only Story and Shutter Island movie. This is my academic details. My research question for this presentation is how do the Only Story and Shutter Island depict memory manipulation through unreliable narration, and what does this reveal about the relationship between trauma, self-deception, and subjective reality? My hypothesis is a memory is not fixed record of the past, but a malleable construct shaped by emotional needs, trauma, and self-deception, as seen in the unreliable narrator of the Only Story and Shutter Island, who manipulate their memories to protect themselves from the painful truths. The novel, The Only Story, it is written by Julian Barnes, and The Shutter Island, which is the movie directed by Martin Scorsese, and it is based on the novel by Dennis Lehane with the same title. Now, first, the role of unreliable narrator. The concept is given by Booth. The memory as a defensive mechanism. The memory is not recording of the fact, but reconstruction influenced by the emotions. Unreliable narrators alter reality to protect themselves from the painful truths. Let's discuss our two protagonists from the novel and the movie. First, from the novel, Paul Roberts. He romanticizes the past, selective memory, filters out the painful details to preserve the ideal version of love. In the beginning, we find that how he described the Susan and the love affair goes between them two. So the quote we also find from the novel: memory sorts and shift according to the demands made on it by the rememberer. As we discussed in the class also, that the Paul is the more reliable, unreliable narrator, because in his own telling of the story, in his own narration, he falsifies himself. He says that I don't keep the diary, and again he says that I keep the diary. So that sees that contradictions and self-doubt moves between first, second, and third narration, reflecting the emotional detachment. First, we find that he is narrating the story in the first person, later second in the third. Uh, do all these things from the quote, do all these things relating brings me closer to the truth or furthering away? I'm not sure. The role of the unreliable narrator in the movie, and the character of Teddy Daniels from the Shutter Island, escaping trauma, constructing false reality, creates a detective persona of the escape his identity as Andrew Ledis, and believes in the government conspiracy instead of facing his wrongs. Finds the hallucination and delusions, like sees vision of his wife's children and war experience. Trauma distorts his perception of reality. The Saburi and in his article argues that Andrew's psyche is fragmented due to the past trauma and guilt. Final choice, as we find the famous dialogue also, embracing the lie or the truth, chooses to remain in the delusion rather than to face in the pain in the past. In the last movie scene, we find which would be, he himself says that which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man. So he himself is like in the self delusion that what to do. Psychological distortions and the trauma we find in the Paul Robbins, love loss and the memory distortion, reframe his past and avoid emotional suffering. Memory sorts and shifts according to the demands made on it by the rememberer. We choose what we want to remember, and we forget the things we don't want to remember. His perspective changes over time. Initially sees Susan as his great love, like he sees like I am doing some like going against the tradition, and this love is like untraditional love, but later recognizes her flaws and become clings to his idealized version. A denial of emotional pain. Even when he acknowledges loss, he remains stuck in his only story rather than moving forward. In the other part, we find Teddy Daniels in the Shutter Island. Trauma-induced hallucination, as we have discussed in the past also. He hallucinates his wife and the war and the detective background of his. So he hallucinates as repressive as a survival mechanism. Construct an envelope detective fantasy to avoid confronting his guilt. War trauma adds another layer of psychological burden and reinforcing his delusion. Memory hacking, it is also one concept that we construct our own memory by hacking our own self. Our mind tricks us. Memory is shapeable and can be manipulated, as Singh argue in his article that memories are not fixed record but reconstructed narratives. People unconsciously alter, omit, and distort memories to fit personal beliefs and emotion. How do we find in the novel how Paul's memory is hacked, romanticizes Susan and their relationship despite of this emotional suffering that we have seen before also. Memory prioritizes whatever is most painful to help keep the bearer to those memories going. That he himself argues that in the novel. Selective forgetting ignores Susan's alcoholism and their decline relationship to preserve the illusion of love. Narrative paradox claims to tell the only story, yet constantly revises it and over time. He says that I am being the truthful person. I try to be a truthful person, but later part we find that he himself also distorts his own memory and the narratives. How Teddy's memory is hacked suppresses reality and constructs a detective fantasy. Teddy has locked himself into the fantasy world, rejecting memories too painful to bear. Hallucinations is why, as we have discussed, false perception of the reality. His mind fills in the gap with the delusion rather than the confronting the truth. uh, Trust or truth, can we ever know the reality? Truth is subjective and shaped by the perception. Memory is unreliable. What we recall is influenced by the emotion and bias. Both the only story and Shutter Island challenge the idea of objective truth. Paul's struggle with the truth we find clings to an idealized past despite of the contradictions. In the quote we find, do all this retelling brings me closer to the truth or move further away? I am not sure. He himself argues that it is moving towards the truth or the false. Selective memory protects him from the emotional pain. In the Teddy's case, we find he rejects the reality of embrace the lie because it is easier than facing the reality. In the conclusion, we can say that the memory is reconstructed and not recorded. Unreliable narrators alter their past to cope with the pain, trauma, and self deception, distort the reality. Take away from the presentation, we can say truth is subjective and shaped by the memory. We remember what we can emotionally handle, not what truly happen. Do we accept reality or create a version we can live with? So that is the ultimate question, as Paul says in the novel also. My learning outcome from the novel is most of the novels or any literature we find that we see the history, we see the past, we see the characters, but the Paul brings us to re introspect ourselves. Like, are we telling the lie to ourselves? So it gives me the ability, or we can say the learning to how to see ourselves, how to see ourselves, how we shape our memory, and how we tell the truth. While we are telling our own story, still we distort the memory and the story. So that is also I have learned from the presentation and also from the novel. These are my references, and I also take the help of from ChatGPT to organize the content and for rectifying the grammatical errors. Now for the questions.
So, Yashraj, my question is, if Paul from The Only Story and Teddy from Shutter Island were meet, what do you think they would say to each other about memory and truth?
That's an interesting question. If they were to meet, I think the Paul is he's telling the story, but still he's honest to himself. Because while telling the story, he himself says that I am also responsible for the fall of Susan and the past mistakes that he has made, and he's distorting his memory. While in the Teddy's character is in the novel or in the movie, we find that he is living in the self delusion. So we might face that he sometimes hallucinates. He sometimes forget himself. If the Paul, we can say, still he tells the real mistakes that he has made in the past, but in the Teddy's case, we are still in the doubt that he himself will tell the reality, or the tell that my memory distorts or I hallucinate or not. So that would be the discussion between the two if they were to match.
Yashraj, my question is for you. Like this term unreliable, reliable narrator has emerged in 20th century due to this World War II. So, do you think reading unreliable narrators like Paul and Teddy helps people to become skeptical of political leaders' speech?
Yes, I definitely agree with this statement. Like whenever we see unreliable narrator or telling the story, these narratives makes us more skeptical of with whatever is being told. Like as we do the experiment of ourselves also. Like whenever we tell something, we like taking ourselves in a good side also. Whenever we are telling the story, like I am the hero of the story. So whenever any politicians or they are making any statement, there are higher possibilities that they are telling the truth rather than the lie. Or like in the personal telling of the story, like in the Paul or Teddy, they don't have to give any like propaganda. They don't have to make uh, their party win. But in the politicians, we also find that they have to tell people that we are the righteous people and we are telling the truth. So these are also like can be falsified, and they are also the can be defined as unreliable narrator. So that is from my side.